All right, we're back. It is COMP229, Fall 2016 semester, and Week 9, Part 3 of our broadcast. We're in the middle of fixing these problems. We made one view. Next, I updated GitHub for those people who are watching as well. And I've got my controller, my store controller, and I got some problems, right? Remember I said I want to kind of add some, right? I want to list the genre, and I want to do it manually. Okay. And I want to pass these. I want to make a list of genre and pass them into my. Now, I don't have to do this because I have connection to a database, but I want to show you how to do it manually, and that's why we're doing it like this. Okay? So, database for future iterations, because we're going to make a template from lesson 9 next week, and we're going to continue as opposed to make writing from scratch. So how do I fix this problem? Well, I know that genre is passing in disco, right? Model. So if I go to my genre model, I'm actually going to modify my model, right? So here's my genre model. And notice that I have a constructor that takes no arguments, finds albums as a new hash set of album. I don't want that. I want another constructor that I want to create. This is just C#, right? That takes a string. And it's going to be the genre name. So string is name. And what I want to say is that this dot name, capital name, is equal to name. So that's what it's going to do. Is this understandable? So remember that this is just a class. A class, in my class, I have a constructor. This time I have two constructors. Constructor from my class for when I create objects that has single items with no constructor, right? Where I create a hash set of type album. The case that I'm using, I also can have a second constructor, which I just made. And for those people who want to do the quick comments, I can do // right, which is this takes one argument of type string and assigns its value, to the name property. That's what it is, just it. So I take the string name and assign it to the name value for my genre. Okay. I don't need a description. It's not required. A genre ID automatically. Okay. But remember, we are connected to a database here. So we'll come back to this in a bit. It doesn't say that there's no null. Null is not, there's no required here. Okay. It's saying that I need a new item of type name. So a new item of type genre with a new, that's what this thing does, okay? Now this fixes the problem in my controller. Notice that there's no problem now in my controller. I'm creating a list of these fantasy items called disco, jazz, and rock. I'm not accessing my database here. All I'm doing is creating a local list, and I'm passing it into the view. Okay, now that that's fixed, notice that we have a problem with album, right? Well, we had to do the same thing for our albums controller. Go to my album controller, my album model, right? And here in my album model, my album class, right? Do I have a constructor? Right? So I'm going to make one. So inside my partial class, right? I'm going to go in here and go public. And this is my default empty constructor. I don't need to do this. But what does my store controller need? It needs an integer ID. That's what it needs. But I'm passing in, this is interesting, instead of an integer, I'm passing in a string value I'm going to set up. So this is what my album is, right? Which is album number 1. Right? That's not really my album name, right? But I'm making my album name. I'm creating a phantom album, right? Whatever it is, right? Okay, so how do I do that? modify the model too. So now we know it takes a string, right? And which is the title of my album, right? Same thing, I'm gonna say this dot capital T title is equal to title. Make sense? I just made a constructor, and this I can say something like, you know, sorry, triple forward slash constructor that takes one argument, title, sets a title property, capital T, to its value. Okay. Or for me to use this, so I modify my album and I modify my models, I need to build. Please build your solution. If there's a problem, right here, I'll say builds failed. You know, as an example, if it didn't work. In this case, we succeeded. We're good, right? Okay, if I go back to my store controller, take a look. No error. Because I'm passing in this stuff. I'm creating a new object of type album, and I'm passing it in as if I didn't have a database. That's what I'm doing. Let's see right now if my index works. My index, which is right here, my index.cshtml, which is inside my store, and get a list of items, right? What list would I get based on my store controller? What list would I get, Hina? What list would I get? It's right there in front of you. Huh? Disco, jazz, and rock. That's the list you're going to get. And they're going to be links. Right. So run. Now I'm going to go right now my MVC music store doesn't really look like a music store. It looks like this. And there is no links, right? We're going to fix that. But here, I want to go to store, press enter. Should be able to go to my index. And if I did everything right, it should see this. If you don't, you have a problem. Now, if I hover over this, you can see that this is a list. And if I hover over it, tells me that, look, it shows me the URL path down here in the bottom left, right here, down here in the bottom left, it'll appear. If you try it yourself, next link, disco, jazz, rock, and it built these hyperlinks, right, inside of view, my index. And what I'm doing here is I'm using Razor. We're going to explain this in my PowerPoint in a second. I'm using Razor. One, connect the data model to my view, right? Right now, my data model is not even connected to my database. It's just a small data inside my index action method. That's what I've done, right? So there is no real connection right now to my database. And two, counting how many genre I have. So it says select from blank genre. Now, if I run this, how many genre I have? Pick a list of 3 genre, right? Disco, jazz, and rock. Hey, is there an other genre of music that you guys like? Huh? Okay, let's see how it works if I add another one. So if I go back to here, and this, the way we've been writing it so far, if this was true, we could do something like this. We could just add a new genre, right? And to show you this, we'll say electronic, right? This list by commas, that's nice, right? And if I run this thing again, and if I go to my store controller, because I have my default style, which we're going to modify in a bit, right? I see the default style that's included here. What I want to do is I want to go to store. When I go there, it's going to show me now 4 genre. See how it updated the count? How many of these I have in my list? How many items are in the list? There's 4. So it's going to show me the 4. Right? Okay, let's do part 2 now. We've done in my controller, we've done this index action, right? Let's do the browse action. How do I do a view from my browse action? How do I do a view from my browse action? What do I do? No, you're not watching? You don't know? How do I do a view from my browse action? Come on. Here's my browse action. I want to make a view one time. How do I do it? Right click, good, on the browse, on the name of my method, right click. Right? It's pretty simple. And when I do that, it gives me some options. I don't want to make an angular view, not yet, right? We'll do that some other time. I want MVC view, click add. Now it's going to tell me what kind of view do I want. I want a view without a model, because if I connect it to one of these, it'll create a special kind of view. Like it'll actually scaffold out a whole view for me. We don't want that yet. We'll get there later, right? Just to show you we can do that. So we want an empty view. We want to call it browse. That's the view name, right? We want to use a layout page, the default layout page we're using right now, and click add. Empty view, like this. So that is my empty browse view. Makes sense. My empty browse view. Okay, so when we browse, right, what I want to do, we want to kind of say what we're browsing for. So we're going to say something like, you know, browsing genre, whatever the model name is. Now up here, what we can do is what we did last time. We want to kind of include the model, right? So we're going to say at, we'll say COMP229. If you don't know the whole thing, control space will fill it in for you. Control space. Then we can go models. Call it something else, right? So use control space for that. And then we'll say at lowercase m for model, right? And we'll call it something locally. Genre, locally. Be careful here, right? This genre has to match whatever the model is. Model. So the model is of type genre, right? Now, if you look at a store controller, and if you look at the browse, I'm returning a model of type genre. Things, sorry. The browse action, the browse view, and the browse action, the return type, the return that's being passed into the browse action, I'm making a reference between this object that I've created right here on line 39, passing into the view, that's how I pass an object into the view, with this m lowercase model, so I can reference it later. Lowercase model and do the following. At model, uppercase, dot, and because it represents one model, name. Model name, whatever the model is. In this case, the genre name, which is disco or rock or electronic. Okay? Let's test this out and see if it works. Let's say first we'll build a solution, smart to do, right? If there's any errors, they'll come up. Then we'll run the model, we'll run the whole works, right? And notice it takes us right to the browse action. Uh-oh, we're going to the browse action. What's the default? Uh-oh, browsing genre, nothing, right? Why? Because I went right to the browse action. If I go back to the store right here, here's my store. Hey, disco, right? It should say browsing genre disco, right? And if I go on electronic, browsing genre electronic, it didn't work how we wanted it to work. Because remember what we said earlier, we made a default to make it disco if my string was empty. Is it empty or is it null? Empty is not null. Empty means it's something. it contains the empty string value. I put it up there so you can see it. And again, you'd be forgiven to think this is right. Put in null. Let's stop debugging for a second. If I put in null, it means null has been uninitialized. That's what it means. So the string, there is no string. It's uninitialized. If the string is uninitialized, we'll then set it to something. Let's see if that works. Now, so I'm going to go back to my index page, build everything for me. Here's my index page, right? By hand, I'm going to change my index to genre, right? Or to browse, sorry, browse. And if I press enter, disco, because that's the default. So if I don't put anything in, it's going to show me disco, right? Okay, cool. Is that understandable, what I just did? Does anyone not understand? Because that's more important. Let me go back and recap. In my store controller, right? I'm passing in the URL. So anything that's in this line, on the line of my method, is what I'm listening for. I'm listening for a genre. And look at this line. This is a great example of what it's going to look like. Type, it's going to take the form of whatever the browse, question mark, this thing here, right, which is genre. That's where I'm getting this format. And then passing into it. Empty, if I don't pass anything into it, I'm going to pass something into it by default. And then I'm going to create an object that I'm going to pass into my view. So I'm going to take the information that I get here, create an object, pass in the title, which is disco, object, and pass it into my view. Now I have access to that one object. Okay, here's the last part, the details for my album, right? So, but I can't get to it, right? I can't get to it. Album 1, 2, 3, 4. I never made, this is album 1, right, or album 2, or whatever, right? So I don't have any albums in here for my, for my model. Can't get to it because in my view, like that. What if I was making my, for now, I'm going to make a stub album, right? I'm going to make my stub, and a stub means I'm going to make my view. How do I make my view? Right-click on details. I'm sorry to do this to you guys, and I apologize, but if I don't do this a bunch of times, later on, then you're going to go, oh, I don't know how to do it. Over again, repetition. I can show you. So empty without model. I'm going to click add. It's going to empty this empty model, which just has details right now. It's with album, right? And then now I need this thing again. I need to go back up here. I want to have a reference to the model at using, right? The name of my project, so COMP229. Even if I spell it wrong, doesn't matter, right? Dot. Right, so I get access to the models folder. That's one way of doing it, by the way. There's another way of doing it with the web config. You can actually add models, the model folder, to every page if you want to put it inside the web.config file. We'll show you how to do that later on. And then at model, lowercase m, specifies what type of object I'm passing in. So now my model with a capital M refers to a type of album, right? And this way I can say at m dot title, right? I'm going to kind of show the album title there. I want to go crazy. What other items can I put in the album title? Album. It doesn't have title, right? I can also do description, the artist, all kinds of other stuff that's included in the album. Right now, we're only just showing the title. All right, so that's how you can make views by hand. Show you this so you understand what I'm doing and how to fix problems. How do I want to fix these problems? I made this like temporary view and whatever. Okay. Let's make, like we did last time, another controller really quickly, and I mean really quickly, right? Where I want to show all the albums, like I did last time. Remember, I did this last time. Actually, we'll do a list of genres instead, just to mix it up. Okay? How do I do that? So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, and now I'm going to do a whole other section, a whole other. How do I do that? I'm going to right-click on controllers. I'm going to add, right? MVC controller with views using Entity Framework, just like we did last time. I'm going to click Add. It's gonna automatically fill in my data context class to this. Automatically filled in. This will be blank. I'm going to pull genre in there because we did albums last week. I'm going to generate views this time. I'm going to generate all the views, right? And I'm also going to include reference script libraries. Please always include that. Call the genre controller and press Add. It's going to scaffold in everything now. So if I want to see all of my genre, I can do that. By the way, you can scaffold as often and as much as you like, right? Even if you can call it different controllers. Tom controller, whatever. However many controllers you want. Hina controller, right? The family, right? So I got to make your Hina controller. All right, so take a look. Genre controller is right here, right? And it does the same thing that we did before, except this time it fills it in. So this is interesting. This is what really happens. DB connection. We didn't even connect to the DB last time. We put it in there, but we're going to do something like this. DB genre to list. Reference of everything in our database, converting it to a list, and sending it into our index page. So now our index page is actually a list page. So if I was going to look at our index page here, right, this is automatically scaffolding created for you. If I double click on index, you can see now what's happening. This is very, very similar, and this has all been scaffolded for you. Visual Studio has done this for you. Well, take a look here. IEnumerable of type model genre. Write this link here, because I can fool with anything that's been created. Remember, this is mine now, right? Just because it got scaffolded by Visual Studio doesn't mean that I can't do anything with it if I want, right? So I can use this using statement if I want. I can say @using, right? And then the name of my project, 29.models. And I can remove all this stuff because it makes it a lot more understandable. And if I do this, right? IEnumerable of type genre, same thing, what I just did, right? And I've also included my whole models folder now in here. Now let's take a look what this is doing. If I was going to try and understand what's been pre-scaffolded for me, right? Instead of me, I'm including an action link that says create new. I can create a new one, right? Which is going to take me to my create page. That's what this is doing. I can create new albums, right? Or new genre. I'm going to make electronic just because of you, right? And then it's got a table. Here's a table that's been outlined for me that says the display name. This is the TH stands for table header, right? And here's my column header, another column header that says description. So name and description, right? And now inside my table, still inside my table, the table rows, right? So this is one big table row right here. So notice that TR stands for table row. So the first table row is the header row, right? And this is going to show me my model name and description in the first header row. And then for each item in the model, for each genre in genres, right? Loop. That's what this thing is doing. And add another row into the table for each of the items in my list, right? This is right? So where my model table display 4 is actually a label. That's what it really is, right? My model item. This is kind of weird syntax. I got to say that MVC uses this syntax a lot. And if you've never seen fat arrow syntax, this is what this is. Okay, this equal greater than sign is fat arrow syntax. Okay, right, is a quick way of doing a lambda expression. Right, lambda expressions are an advanced topic, right? That you'll be handling programming 3. Okay, so when you guys do programming 3, you should be handling fat arrow expressions or lambda expressions. what is a fat arrow or lambda expression? It's saying this. It's saying, okay, what I want to return is item name. It's almost like I'm doing an anonymous function. That's what this is doing. An anonymous function that returns name of the item. Okay? Don't worry about this. This could be, model item could be M, right? So a model item is the name that is going to be stored in here, model item, right? I'm going to do the same thing for my description. Model item, notice they're using the same one. It's a lambda expression. It's almost like I'm doing an anonymous function right in here, anonymous method call, right? Without actually naming. It's almost like an, instead of a named method, I'm using an anonymous method, so an unnamed method, right? And I'm doing it right here, but I'm returning everything in one line. So instead of saying, do it with an actual name method, I can say, okay, call the get name method, all right? Call the get name method. Okay, what does the get name do? The returns name. Stuff. Do it in one line. That's what lambda expression does. It says, okay, all I want to do is return the item name. I want to store it in something called model item. Okay. And then when I do that, it's going to spit it out right here in my table, right? Inside my column, right? That's what the TD is. Inside the first column in my item, the first, if you will, it's going to have the name of the item, the description of the item. And then at the end, you'll have three more, an edit, a details, and a delete links that are going to appear. Links are going to appear in the third column. Notice that there's an empty table header right here for all the links. So this is what it's going to do. It's going to produce a table. I want you to understand, I don't want you to just accept what Microsoft gives you, right? Example, I scaffolded all my views. This is my list. I could use this list for my menu. Sure, I can do that. I don't have to accept edit, details, and delete. Else. All I want is a list of albums. In that case, what can I do here in my genre? Delete them, right? So how do I do that? I could just go here and say I want to get rid of delete. I want details because details, right? If I click on one of these links, right? Because that's what it's going to do, right? If I look at, by the way, if I go back to my index, CSHTML for the one we made, right? Here's the one I was looking at. Notice like there's details. Details I want, but I don't care about edit. I don't care about delete. I don't want details, right? So let's get rid of these. So let's just do it. So I'm gonna get rid of this, and let's get rid of this. All right, so now all I have is my details, right? So item name, item description, and details. Now I don't need create. I don't need create. Means if I go back to my index CSHTML, I don't want to create items. So this item link up here where it says create a new item, I want to get rid of it. Get rid of this one too. That. And instead of index, I want to call this genre list. Right? Genres, right? That's what this thing is. And we'll say this, we'll say inside our view bag title, we'll say genre list too. Just cause. Right? Here, I don't need my create, so let's get rid of it. And I don't need my delete, so let's get rid of that. And I don't need my edit, so let's get rid of that. Now I only have two, details and index. Even though controller has many things, right? I don't have to use them all. So if I really want to, I don't want to edit, right? I can get rid of it. Let's get rid of them. Oh, this is our program. This is our project, right? We don't have to accept delete. All right? We don't have to show it or do it. Just like we did last time. This is up to you how you use it. I'll leave these things in here for, this is the create. We don't need create. Both the get and the post. Talk about what both do later on. Index, and I need details, right? Okay, let's see what I can do with my genre controller. Run this thing. Now this is accessing the database. This is not me making genre. This is me accessing the database to get a list of genre that's in the database, based with EF framework, right? So now if I go here and I go, right, genre, press enter. What about with the single genre? Genre, press enter. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get a resource out of bounds, right? How about if I go genre with an S, maybe? That's what I wanted. That'll be okay. Gotta blame Trump. All right, there we go. Said it again. Here's rock, jazz, metal, alternative, disco, blues, Latin, reggae. And notice that on the right, there is no edit or delete. It's just details. If I want to look at rock, I can click on details page, which it does, details that I have for this thing. Okay, that's what it does. Now it says edit. Oh man, it'll take me to my edit page, but it doesn't exist. Notice that I have to modify these other pages, like this one. Okay, so because I want to modify this this page to take away edit details page, let's take a look at that. So I want this edit link to be here. Okay, so go back, stop, details page, which is here, which is here. And notice it says view bag details. And again, see that this is looking at returning a model. I can do the same thing I did last time if I wanted to. I'm modifying the model. I'm making you guys sick with this stuff, but I understand. Using comp, oops, control space, dot models. All I'm doing is separating it. I don't need a semicolon. Model is for this one is of type genre, right? The genre model. Now here's something new. It's what's DL stand for? Over if you don't know what it is, right? 0 or more name value groups. Here's a description list. This is really good use of semantic HTML, by the way. Action here. This action link at the bottom, I want to get rid of it, right? Because I don't have it edit anymore. I just have the ability for me to look and go back to the list. Look, this is these two things I showed you is almost enough to produce your menu. Right now, you can start going with your menu because if I modify, heavily modify, right? It's exactly what I need. I'm creating a list, and this is my details. Again, and run it. So here's my details. Uh-oh. If I go there with my details, but I don't put anything in there, there is no default. So I get this bad request because, right? How do I fix that? I need to put a default value, right? So let's go back. Genre controller, notice that it needs an ID, but I haven't set up an ID by default. So let's just add one. We'll say ID is equal to 1. Right? Just like we did last time. Now we're not going to have a bad request anymore. So we can take this out if we want. ID is equal to no. So we can get rid of this thing. Monkeying with my controller. Come on, I'm making it so you guys can think about how to do this. If I run it again. Are you guys getting it? Controller sends data to view. Is the thing that renders the view. Takes that partial code, right, that we have. Maybe partial code is more like fragment. So if I go to genre, right, and press enter, I'm going to see again my list of genres, right? If I click on details, detail I want. But what if I take this away and press enter? I'm still going to get there, right? If I put another number in there that doesn't exist, like for example, /1000, press enter, now what's going to happen? right? Bad request. It's not found, right? If I try and put a number in there that doesn't exist, 1,000. And again, there's ways I can change that, because I can say, well, if my total count, go to the last item, right? So lots of stuff you can do inside the controller. But we're not going to do that right now. So that's what the controller does. The controller, it connects to the views. The views are inside the views folder. Use manually, or you can scaffold them out and then you can modify them. It's totally fine. Okay, let's make this look like an MVC music store now. So in content, notice that there is site.css. Here's my site.css. And right now it looks like this, right? Well, I've included another site CSS up online for you. Project content up on eCentennial, right? There's a couple things you have here. Under assets, right? And under content, you have site.css. CSS, and pull it into your content folder, your existing content folder, like this. And it's going to ask me if I want to overwrite. The answer is yes, I do. Now, it's going to change this a lot. It's going to make this like this, which is going to change the look and feel of our site. Do a couple of things. Lots of stuff that we just added. This is right from our example, my walkthrough, right? Lots of stuff this thing added. Woo! Lots of crazy stuff. It's all the site CSS stuff. Okay, that's one. And now I'm also going to add in that assets folder, and I'm going to put it inside my main. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. I could kind of drag and drop, and I want to caution you. You might think that sometimes it's okay just to drag and drop. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So take my assets folder and drag and drop it into my project, right? And then assets appears, but oh man, what happened to images? It's there. It's just hidden, right? There it is. Here's images, and I have to include it in my project, right? And include in project. And this is also going to include all the images in here. So there's my images. So we got assets, and let's just hide this up here. So I got assets and content. So I'm going to make this thing look like a store controller, like a store. Let's run this thing. See what happens. Without doing anything. Okay, we're going to get rid of. We're going to reset our index page in a second. Okay. All right. Well, let's refresh that. We got this index page here, right? Well, hold on. Well, I don't understand, Tom, because it looks exactly the same. I've added my site.css, right? Well, remember that site.css only going to be active things like add different details, right, to my page. For example, header, H1, any H1 tag inside the header, right? And notice it also shows content images logo.ping. There is nothing like that. It has to be assets. Please change this in your CSS. Asset images logo.ping, which is this, right? That's in the header. We don't have a header yet. We have to add that in, an ID of header. The H1 tag with an ID of header, right? And the same thing goes with my promotion, right? Which is inside of another div tag, which we're going to make. Content is going to be assets. And it's got to be lowercase images, because I think I made it lowercase, but images, capital or lowercase, doesn't really care. You can see what it looks like now. So these are things that won't do anything unless I add these CSS blocks in there, right? Okay, cool. So I've got some CSS. It's not looking any different. And so I'm going to kind of get rid of all this in a second. And I want to make sure that it looks like more like my music store. Finding it. All right, so let's stop debugging. And I'm going to pull up my index page from my home. I have my home controller, right? That's my home controller. And I have my store controller. Store controller, and I have my home controller. All right. So my home controller, right, which is under controllers home. How does it start there? How does it know where to start? Where? Oh, right. So you're saying this startup.cs file. So you're saying? Nope. How does it know is the primary controller? How does it know where I'm going to start? There is no default.aspx page. There is no default or index.html. My home controller is the one, right? My home controller right now, by the way, has this stuff, your application description page, right? So how does it know to go there first? Let's take a look at some other stuff. Inside my app start, there's a bunch of stuff here. Route config shows me my route. This is interesting. Take a look at my route config inside app start. It tells me, number one, pattern, right, of how to get to my, my pages. The pattern is like this. The controller name goes first. Change all of this if you really want to. I don't recommend it, but you could, right? My controller name, the action name, and the ID would be optional, right? Okay, here's my default. Home, index. I don't want this. In fact, I don't even want a home controller, right? So the controller name would be store. My action would be index, would it not? My store controller, here's my index action. So that's correct, with some kind of optional URL parameter, which is cool. Save. Rid of the home controller. Delete. Delete. There we go. And alongside that, let's get rid of the whole home view. This way we can test to make sure that what I said was correct, right? That there is no more home controller, the store controller, right? So if I do a build, let's do a build solution. It's important to do the build solution to make sure there's no errors. Then we run it. Now it should take us right to our store controller by default. Okay. Now the store controller is blank. It's got that one thing that shows us those 4 lists. There we are. Oh, look, it's starting to show up a little different color in the background. But we need to get rid of this. This has got to go, right? Because there is no home about contact. Where is this stuff located? My layout, right? I got to get rid of all this. Let's do that. So stop. I got to go to my layout page. Views shared. That's where my layout page exists, right? Here's my layout CSS HTML page. There it is, right? Now here's something that happens. I got my content CSS and my bundles modernizer. Modernizer actually checks to see if my scripts version of the browser. This is kind of an old backwards compatibility checker to make sure that my modern JavaScript is compatible with my browser. Nowadays, it's almost like we don't need it anymore, right? Because a lot of browsers can handle everything. Of course, compatibility, we leave it in. Home, about, and contact, not cool, all right? And I don't want to make it here. I want to make it to the right, so we have some room. Go navbar, nav, and then inside I want to put this to the right, and then navbar dash right, so it's going to push it over a little bit. We don't need our contact page, right? In fact, our list, our navigation, right? Bar and this whole navigation scheme itself, the only thing that I probably want, because we don't have any of these things anymore, index, is maybe just home. Index page, which would be BR. So let's just get rid of the other ones. Definitely don't want to have this login partial. Let's get rid of this. We don't want to log in anymore. That's how we hide it. We don't have a login partial at all anymore. And now if you notice that we have a bundles jQuery and Bootstrap, that's correct, right? And we also have date, time, now, year, myASP.NET application. We're going to say MVC Music Store. Music Store, that's what that is on the bottom. Inside my action link, navbar is where I want my brand to go, right? And notice my brand, right? Navbar brand, which is up here. Inside this application name, which is the link, text, action link with a class of navbar brand. Okay. We want our navbar brand, right, to be our logo, right? And for me to understand what that is, to get it, notice that in my site.css, which is inside my content folder, at the top, and as I scroll down, it shows me that to get there, I need to put it in an H1 tag. It doesn't have to be navbar brand. It just has to have a header. It's got to be inside of a header, and something with an ID of header and an H1 tag. Change this up. So I want to put an H1 tag, put an ID with a class of header on this UL, right? And I can do that by doing something like this. UL with a class of header, right? And instead of a list item, is in the right place? No, I did not. Hold on. Kill this. I meant up here. I'll put a div tag of header, right? And inside my div tag, I'm going to have an H1, right? Right there. Because that's what my site CSS is looking for. Hey, the way we read this line is, hey, search for every item, every tag that has a header ID. Look for an H1 tag. It has to have an H1 tag with a parent that has an ID of header. If it doesn't have that, don't do anything. If it does, do this. Okay? To our crazy layout. Run it. Up our nav bar too. Yeah, messed up our nav bar pretty good. It made it pretty large too, right? Also, this nav bar is nav bar inverse, right? That's why it's black. Nav bar inverse, right? It adheres to Bootstrap. So if I go to getbootstrap.com, right? And if I was going to go to, I think it's components, navbar, and if you look through here, I might have done it wrong. The brand, it shows you what the brand looks like, right? So here, it's got to be a link, right? It's instead of a div tag, we can make it an anchor tag like this. I'm just going to copy this, copy, and go back to here. HTML instead of this header. I'll put underneath there a button that says brand, the link. Instead of brand, right? We'll take this header ID, just to be compatible, and put this inside here, inside the anchor tag. Will actually be an H1 tag. Right? Now we get rid of this. And if there's any errors, it'll tell you. Refresh the page. If I go back to here and I refresh, we should see immediate results from that. You can't see it, but it's actually hidden under this little black bar. How do we show the black bar? How do we show this thing? Because you can't see anything. But you see, if I click on this, right, it's clickable. If I kind of scroll down a little bit, it's clickable because hides it. Well, if I go back to here and notice where it says navbar inverse, we want to put navbar default, right? What navbar default makes it is a white navbar. So if I go back to here, immediate results for that. Okay, cool. Take a look. It's right here, right? It's trying to show it. And what about doing something else? If I want to do this with CSS and I want to target it, instead of doing it like this, tag does weird things, right? And also it's hiding this stuff. Look at this. It's hiding all this. Like it's hiding the, if I want to push this down a little bit, but maybe about 30 pixels. So I can go to my, here, to my CSS, and if I say I want to push the margin down by 30 pixels, right now the margin's 0, right? And I want to push the margin down, something like that. So this is margin bottom. It doesn't say anything about margin top. So I can say margin top 30 is 0. So it's 30 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 0 pixels, right? 0, 0, 0, like this. 0, 0, 0. How come? How can I do this? It says 30 is not a valid value for margin property. Pixels in. But I can put zeros. There we go. Okay, so again, it's top works is top right, bottom left. So these values is top right, bottom left. That's what it works like. Right, going back to CSS 101. Right. All right, let's see what immediately affects this has, right? Whoa, it's massive. What happened? It's like, it's huge, this whole thing. It's crazy big. Right? Well, that added 30 pixel margin to everything. Because if you notice what I did was, it added to star. Star means added to everything. So let's go back to this, 0, 0, 0. Add it to the body. And what I can do is, what I can do over here is I can say something like margin, or it says padding. I say margin dash top is equal to 30 pixels. Back, and now when I refresh, if that's not enough, see, it's still not quite enough. It needs to push down a little bit more. Let's try that again. 50 pixels. And that's pretty good. So browse genre, select from these 4 genres. Now we got to fix the top here, right? And I want to show my object right here. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. I'm trying to show it with CSS, right? And I'm trying to do it the way these guys did it was they try to show it inside of their, there's something that has header with an H1 tag, and then we added a bunch of padding. Take a look. A padding of 45 pixels from the top. 5 pixels from the top, make it 0 pixels for now. Right? And we're going to go back, see what it looks like, refresh. Nothing. So that's one thing. So top, right, bottom, 5 pixels from the bottom. Let's get rid of that and put 0. Right? It also floats to the left. That's a bad thing. Floating to the left. Floats are just bad altogether. Get rid of this thing. So how do I comment out stuff in CSS? Can I do this? No. But I can do this. Right? So I can do one of these. I can do it properly without doing both stars. Okay, that's just Microsoft for you. All right, so I want to take out the float. And you can check this out. Font size, 18 pixels. Do I really need that? Don't know. And refresh. All right, still not showing up. Remember, there's other ways to check this as well. Padding I can take out. fact, let's take out let's put the background in there. So let's take all this stuff out, including font size, and see what it does. So I want to put it in the background, refresh. Still not there. Still there. It's actually there, but it's like flat, right? And I could say that the no repeat, it says that, right? But I could say the size of the image is something. You know, height is 100%. Okay. And if I want to inspect it, I could go inspect to see what's going on there. Not getting that. Right? And I can see what it looks like, right? Here's my, and I look at the actual nav bar. Here's my nav bar header. And then inside my header, I have this problem. I can start doing some troubleshooting, right? And inside my H1 tag, here's my H1 tag. And it shows you what it's trying to do. It's trying to show this image at 85 by 38 pixels, 85 wide, right? So it should be able to fit in there, no problem. Okay. And it's in a link. So you notice I should be able to click on it, right? 36 pixels, which is totally correct. And I can see some other stuff, 2 amps, that's hidden, right? Displays block, so it's not display float anymore. Thank God. That was basically stopping us as well. To see if it works, right? So height of 100% doesn't really do anything. I can click them off and on right here inside of this. Font size of 36 pixels. I can click off that. Margin top. Again, I can click that off and on and see what that does. Margin bottom of 10 pixels. Font family inherit an H1 margin of 0.67 ems, right? These are all things that are inherited. Computer actually tells you the computed values of all this stuff, right? So you can see what's going on, right? But you can see how it's there, but it's flat style, if you will. And instead of 100%, you can also specify a height size. Check it out without actually doing any changes. So I want to make it like, I don't know, 50 pixels, right? And see what it does. Right? So does it do anything, this H1, right? And how about this? If I want to make my all H1 tags 50 pixels, like, can I do that too? Can I go like height 50 pixels? That's going to really mess up my page, right? All H1 tags are 50 pixels height. What else could I do to make it void? I want to try and make it in the background, but I'm having unsuccessful times at it because of there's other CSS that's blocking what I'm trying to do, right? So I'm trying to troubleshoot with you guys. Okay. Easy way to fix this. Here's what this, right? I know where my asset is. No repeat. And what I want to do is, the other thing is, did I save this thing? That's a problem. With a height of 100%. Let's go back into my layout and get rid of my IDE altogether in there. And I want to put in there the image of the link, right? So I can kind of, is there a way of dragging and dropping in there, right? So could I just go something like this, assets, and take my logo and pull it in, right? That's not what I want, right? But for now, this is cool. I definitely don't want to do this thing here, because that can cause me issues. I want to kind of do one of those. And this link should go back to my index page, right? So it should be my href. Remember, I'm actually doing an actual href, which I want to convert into a URL action, right? So if I do dot action, right? And if I open this up, you can see the options that I have for URL action, right? If I open it up, there's several different overloads. Is the link text, right? The actual link itself plus the link text. So if I go to where I want to go. I want to go to my index, right, and the controller name, and this is my, now again, notice what it says here. My URL help and action string is action name, and then plus my, to be my home controller or my store controller, if I'm not wrong. If I kind of go there, it tells me what it is. Action name and then controller name, right? Back to my, when I click on my logo, it's going to take me back here. But let's see if my logo actually appears. Again, I'm having trouble making my logo appear, right? So let's try and figure that out. Kind of CSS. And one day, when things are, oh, okay. Bootstrap. Right? Makes sense? Now, I do need a little bit more space here because my logo is quite big. CSS after. But for now, you can see that it's starting to come out as my music store, which work okay. I've got a little bit of style, and we're kind of on our way to making our NBC Music Store. One thing I don't have is kind of like our title somewhere that says like NBC Music Store, right? We should probably have that somewhere too. But we do indeed. We have that promotion, right? So I could do something like go back to my CSS for a second and notice that there is a promotion with an ID of promotion that does this, that assets images. It'll actually put this in there, right? Okay, so we'll go into my index page and put a promote. I did with an ID of promotion. So I can't do it here in my layout, right? It's got to be in my index page, in my view. So if I go to my store view, index page, and before I browse my genre, I want to put a div tag, right, of promotion, right? Let's see how that works. If that works okay. Change this later on. But for now, if we did everything correctly, it should do that, right? Gonna hurt myself there for a second, right? So here's my list from a few genre. Here are my genre lists, right? You can scaffold stuff out really quickly with MVC. That's what I want to show you, right? You have a lot of control. And we talked about a bunch of stuff. I did a bunch of stuff with you guys just now. Let me update because Eddie's going to kill me. My GitHub, right? So you have everything I have, right? Updated project. We did a lot of little changes. So I'll say Team Explorer, Home, changes, bunch of 19 changes. We'll say updated project. Have commit all, Home, and then sync. Where's sync? There's sync and push. All right, so it's pushed. So you should have all your changes. All right. But the stuff that we did. So we kind of just review, right? So just before we summarize, before we finish off, right? Monkeyed with our controllers, right? We have two ways of getting our model data, right? One way we talked about was actually connecting to the database, and the other way was when we monkeyed around here, and we're going to change this up later on with our store controller. Our store controller, we actually added genre. We don't have to do this. DB, our database is right here, right? So instead of passing a genre in here, what's another way of doing that with our DB? We did it. And by the way, everything that works in C# still works here, so I can do one of these. Here's our list, right? Or I could do my genre is I want to pass in a DB, right? Genre, right? That's what this is. And .toList. I could pass this in at my database connection and passing a list, all my genre in here instead of doing this. Let's see what that does. Just curious, right? See what it does, right? If this works out. This is manually, and I can always do it like this as well, just like it did it in our standard controller that we made. Remember, it's going to go by default to my store controller. Today, how we set up the default controller, my default view, right? By going into my startup file. Now, these are all my actual ones. These are my real ones. Rock, it's going to still show rock. That's not changed because we didn't change that, right? There's metal. But these are the real ones, right? The ones that we really want to show. And we got this from the database with one simple change, right? So I want you to understand what we did here. Whenever we pass things here onto the top, we pass things to the top of our URL. This is what we're passing to our URL. Anything we pass into the method. Anything we pass out of the method gets passed into the view. We're returning the view, and we're passing something into the view. We're passing in a list of type genre. And the view has to be able to receive that type. Almost like a sender and a receiver. This is our sender, right? And the receiver happens at the view. Sender and a receiver happens on the view side. So if I go to store, and if I go to index, the receiver says, I'm getting an object of type genre list, an IEnumerable type. Anytime we see IEnumerable, I want you to think about a list. List of genre. That's the receiver. The sender is from the controller, right? And then once I have that, I can use the to specify what type it is, and the uppercase M to actually do something with it. So I can say, okay, take that model, that actual object now, and count how many there are. There's 10 of them, 10 genre, right? Okay, now create another list and do a for loop. List item inside the list, create a new list item. Keep doing that until they're done, right? And that's what we're doing here. So we're creating a dynamic list by accessing the database. Okay. Any questions? I know there's a lot. Let me update my Team Explorer again, because you guys are going to go like, someone's going to say, Tom, you updated the store controller. Updated store controller. Home. And then sync push. There we go. You have that now. Okay, so that's all I did was change this one line. I just commented these out and put this, right? Okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint with something like that before we finish, because I want to cover some of these things. We didn't cover all. There's 77 slides here. There's no way I'm going through it all, because I don't read PowerPoint. So this is for you, for your reference. Okay, I put these PowerPoints in place because going outside the bounds of our book a little bit, right? Okay, let me take that back. I'm going outside the bounds of our book a lot, and so I have to give you a book, right? So this is what this is. This is book that you don't have, right? It explains all the stuff I'm talking about here, as this is a templating engine. We talked about that, the view engine that we're using, right? And it talks about view basics here, going over how to with our view bag. View bag being the default container, this little simple container we can use to solve problems. But the problem with the view bag is it's data type to it. And what I've shown you here with the way we did it was we actually created a typed object, right, that we can do something with for passing in some basic, stuff from the controller. That's all it does. And in the view conventions, it talks about .NET and where it came from, how to create the views based on the controller, and it talks about how it works out, how the view is, right, and then the controller name where everything resides. Talks about that for views, which we kind of talked about last week too. You can also set it to, when you set stuff into the view, remember this is the sender, return a view with my action result. I can also put in another URL. I don't have to even send it to the view that it's supposed to go to, view, like this, by putting in this actual URL in here too. It'll actually redirect the request, my index, to something else if I want to. There's no always. This makes no sense for us to do this, right? We do this when something's broken or when we're constructing a page or something, and we have an alternate page you want them to send it to. We can do it like this. send a view to another page. We talked about view bag before, as it's not a strongly typed view. It's kind of a way of sending information, to the view from our controller. Thing like a view that has a data type, we want to use a model, and we're going to talk about models next week. So I know we kind of talked about views and models and controllers all today as well. Views, there's a couple ways we can scaffold views out. We create views by hand, like we did. We could also create views through a scaffold, right? This just talks about how to send in a view bag. We can cast a view bag as a type if you really want to as well. But why would I do this? Why would I send a view as a type? Use the as syntax as to cast this view bag albums as a type of album, as a list of albums. You could do that too. Rather send it in as a model, which is a much better way of doing it. We're talking model view controller. Why would I do that with a view bag, right? View bag, simple items. So I'm going to kind of skip this part here. This is for how view bag falls short, and I kind of messed this one up. And then as we move forward, let's do that again too. It talks about how you can include your models instead of your namespace, how I was including it at the top by using MVC Music Store models. You can also include it in here inside your web.config page, right? So in your web.config file, which is Explorer, right? Web.config. Not this, there's two actually. There's one that's inside views and another one that's down here, right? App settings, right? And notice that inside of our document, right? It's inside system.web.webpages.razor. Page base type is system.web.mvc.webpage view page, right? But do you see pages in here anywhere? Right? Here. Because there's two web.config files. There's one that's for our application, and there's another one for all of our views. And if you go to the one for all of our views, now you see this. And you can see that the namespace COMP229 F2016 lesson 9 is always included in all of our pages. We can also do models. We can add that in. Like this. This is adding a namespace to all of our pages. So we don't have to type it every single time. So for example, if we always want to have access to, we can't do control space here because this is an XML file. 16 underscore lesson 9 dot models, right? I can do this too. I can include it. And when I do this and I rebuild my project, if I go back to my index.cshtml, you can see now that even though I've included it by hand like this, I still have access to model, right? And genre. Genre should be still available to me, theoretically. And of course it doesn't, because you know how it is. That's why you got to watch what this thing does, right? But it's supposed to do this. Maybe I didn't type it right. Models. S20 thing. Web config. No, I did. Supposed to basically take this lesson 9 models and include it in every page. And I'm sure I did something wrong. I do that. Anyways, so that's one thing that this is telling you how to do. It's telling you that you can add the namespace in there, and when you add the namespace, it adds it into every page. Okay. So it also tells you how view bag has been created. If you notice, view bag data. So view data, instead of view bag dot title, you can say view data dot, and then in quotations title. And this is dictionary syntax. Value pairs. Here's our key, and this is the value, right? So I could do this. I could set up this view data instead of, because that's what this is, view bag, view data, and view dictionary. An example of this would be, instead of view bag title is equal to index, I could change this to, which is equivalent, by the way, right? View data, and then square brackets, title, right? Index, because this is exactly the same thing. So view bag is really a view data dictionary, right? That's what it is, where I pass in the value of index into this key. It creates an array of objects. In this particular case, the array object is called title, and we're accessing it by its name. So this is equivalent to view bag title. It's exactly the same thing. So I want you to, when you see this, these are identical. Now, why would I use this? More clear of what's happening here, right? But view bag is the most common way. So that's what it is. Okay. So that's the kind of stuff that I talked about there. We talked about view models. This is interesting, an interesting topic. I put it in here, to be honest with you, because it helps us, kind of solve problems. And we're going to use a view model, the order. When we go back and do an order, we're going to do a shopping cart, and we're also going to have an order, right? And we're going to use a view model for this. So I'm going to refer back to this. I'm not going to talk about it right now. Road, when we get to ordering, we're going to come back to this, and I'm going to show you what a view model is. So let's skip this one for now. We talked about how to add a view, so I'm not going to go over that one. The Razor View Engine is something that I do want to go over really quickly with you because we've talked about it already, and we've kind of go in there. Basically, it's a way of adding syntax, and we have to always look at this @ sign, right? So there's a couple of things that happen. Code expressions is what they're called, right? Code expressions, like this. If you put the @ sign and then items.length in this particular case, kind of insert the value of length of a specific item inside this line, and it knows that it can mix HTML plus this Razor syntax in the same line. It understands. So IntelliSense, Microsoft makes it so smart that it understands that this is okay. The old way, this is web forms. Remember web forms? We used less than %, colon, and then whatever it was. Razor just uses an @ sign, right? And if you look forward, I'm just going to go forward a little bit more. Code expressions. I don't know, what did I do here? So here's where we can define a code expression. Here's my root space. This is my app. Like, this is interesting. I want to kind of say root space.models, so my app.models, but unfortunately, it doesn't turn out like this. Not the way I want it to be. It turns out somehow differently because it tries to put my app here, and it doesn't do what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't. This is what you want to hope. This is what you're hoping for, but you're not going to get that. In order for you to get that, you have to put quotations, or sorry, brackets around it. Right. So if you want to look at root space.models in the span, so Razor is pretty smart. But if you want the actual thing to become part of the dot, so you want to use a string to interpolate a string inside there and actually use the @ syntax with the string, whatever the string name is. Quotations albums, and you put it inside brackets and you say @albums.name, you could do that, right? If you said something like this, if you said string, and then we'll say, we'll call this lowercase albums equal to albums, right? Like one of those, right? So albums, and then what I want to say is albums dot, we'll do genre. So because genres are here, genre, and we'll say genre, right? See how this is genre? And I want to interpolate inside somewhere where it says item.name or genre. The genre.name, whatever the genre is. This is an IEnumerable though. What I'm trying to say is, if I want to say the genre.count or whatever, by going something like this. Sorry, it's not a great example, but I could say something like, genre dot, and hopefully we'll get name or whatever it's going to be. It's two lists though. It's a list of items. Won't work. So basically, you can take a genre and it'll put the capital G genre in there, and put it in there, right? Maybe the better way to put it is a model, right? Launch, and then you can do the same thing. So model.count, we'll do the same thing. We'll say at lowercase model, and then dot. That would actually work. That would actually do what we're asking you to do. Because we're taking this model, and really what we're looking at to do one of these, and that's what it's going to do. But you could do that, right? So if you had a string you wanted to put in there, and it would totally work. We don't want to do that right now. We don't want to mess things up. But that's what this is saying. This is saying you can put in a string and interpolate in there. Okay. And then the other thing is, what happens if you use some kind of email? Because it's an @ sign, right? And the answer is no. It's smart enough to understand email patterns, and it won't get confused. So don't worry about that. Okay, but worst case scenario, if you want to escape, the escape is a double @ sign, if I'm not wrong. Ajax encoding. It's down here where you put a double @ sign to escape. Code blocks is really important too. You can see this a lot of code blocks are done this way, where you have a for each loop. Is a very popular one to do, where item in stuff, and you want to iterate through this list, your stuff itself to be a list to iterate through. In this case, it would be models. So list through all the items in the model. The model, of course, is a genre list, and then you're going to list through, and for each item, you're going to say the item name is, and whatever the item name is, right? So that's how code blocks work. It's like doing this. This is the old way. This is using web form syntax, right? So this is the equivalent. And it's good to understand this. We did a little bit of this with web forms, not a lot with web forms. Okay. Yeah, and this is another example of using, so I want to render partial, and here's my partial page. This is kind of neat too. At render syntax, what it does, it tells you where to render it, and it talks about this in layouts. If I was going to go, by the way, this works too. If you want to calculate something in line, you can say 1 + 2 is equal to @ 1 + 2, and it'll calculate it for you. Any C#, it'll try and evaluate the expression, and that's why it's called expressions. What I want to really show you is, oh yeah, combining text and markup. We've done that a lot. Here that they talk about. That's why I don't want to go through everything. This is for your reference. Here, this is what I was going to show you. So if I want to escape, I can @ sign to escape. It's an escape code, so we can actually put an @ symbol if we need to put that in there, right? And comments, this is kind of server-side commenting. About this, right? This is like putting the comments so that they don't show on the rendered page. Okay, what do I mean by that? So if I put the comment style like this, so @ star and then star @ anything inside of here is a comment, right? It's a multi-line comment, right? So from this to this, comment it out, including this stuff. But why would I want to comment it out? Because if I don't comment it out on the server side, it'll appear on the client side, commented out. If I do regular comment style, like less than, exclamation mark, dash, dash, that whole comment style, the HTML comment style, those comments will appear in my render page, right? Even though it won't, the browser will ignore it, it'll appear. People can see them. If you hidden, I can comment it on I can see them as a developer, but they won't render on the page, right? So sometimes that's really good practice if you want to put things like your name and your student number and all that stuff, only for me to see, but not for somebody else. Server-side comments. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about generic methods for now because that goes with generics. Layouts are really important, and they're like master pages. Like I said before, we talked about this thing at render body, and I'm going to leave you with this one before we go because I think we're done for the day, right? More than done. 8 minutes done, and baked and ready to go home, right? But if you look at the under our shared folder or layout.cshtml, notice that inside of here you have something called at render body, right? Well, at render body takes the stuff that we smash into it from the page, this fragment, and this, it takes all this stuff, evaluates it, inserts it right in here. That's what it does. That's what these layouts do. So layouts surround our page or encapsulate our data of our views, right? And at render body tells you the exact position where we in all that data. That's an important point. And there's other places we can do it. For example, if I want to have our main body, but we also want to include other things, like for example, our footer, something different. So here's our layout. We can create something called a render section, right? And we can call it something called footer. Render section footer, we can actually inject not just the body, but also the footer. And the way we would handle that is footer and then put something inside the footer. So we can not just inject inside of our body, but you can use Razor syntax side of our layout where we kind of defined a render section called footer. We haven't done that yet, but we will. So if I want to have, for example, multiple types of footers, right? One footer for this and another footer that includes other details, I can do that. Like for example, if I want to change my footer to add links to my footer, I can do that by here, especially if I want to have control on the client side. So that's really it for layouts. I mean, you guys know everything there is to know. The only thing I talked about last week was that if you don't have a default layout, ViewStart points to the default layout. So if you don't include a default layout, if you don't actually physically point to it, for you. So you don't have to explicitly say what it is, right? And it already does that. If you look at ViewStart itself, it's another little file. Here it is. Views folder, it's not inside shared, and ViewStart just points to the layout. And of course, why is this good? Because I can have multiple layouts, so I can be working on another layout and I can point to the other one, as opposed to changing 10 files, right? Especially if I explicitly pointed to each of the layouts, I have to go back into each of those files, each of those views, and repoint them to somewhere else. Whereas the default is here, and now I just point to somewhere else. So, I mean, I think Microsoft has really thought about everything here with MVC, right? They're trying to make MVC for programmers by programmers. They're not really thinking about it from a design perspective necessarily, although you could add design elements, of course, which makes pages really better. But remember, MVC is used at an enterprise level typically in more complex websites, which we're going to be building with over the next course of weeks, right? I'm not going to talk about partial views too much, but they go right into how to create a partial view. We already have a partial view that is the login partial that actually shows you. So if you go to any kind of standard site, this partial view. And we're going to create a partial view for our cart, our shopping cart. Our shopping cart is actually going to become a partial view, and it's going to be a custom view that we're going to generate. So for now, let's hold off. We're going to get back to this. Partial view as a custom view, custom little controller that we're going to make. That's it for me for views for this week. Remember that if you haven't had a chance to do it already, Lab 3, of course I've logged out. Lab 3 is due on the Friday at midnight. That's really due. Assignment number 3. Assignment number 2, I'll be okay. I'm just getting tired. Which is your fantasy restaurant. when you tell me who your partners are, I would start on that right away. Again, next week, just to recap, we're doing important week, and we're going to continue building this MVC music store, which is really going to be your example for how to build all your e-commerce sites by the end. Okay? I know it's a lot of stuff today, but it's always a lot of stuff when we're doing Microsoft and MVC. So much, and we'll see you next week.